Iran and Israel are currently engaged in a complex geopolitical situation, with multiple reports suggesting that Iran may have conducted an underground nuclear test for the first time on October 5. The U.S. Geological Survey detected unusual seismic activity with a magnitude of 4.5 at a depth of 10 kilometers in a remote area southeast of Tehran. Numerous Iranian state-run media outlets and military channels reported that an extraordinary announcement regarding Iran's nuclear program would soon be made. The location and timing add a layer of complexity to an already combustible region. Iran may have covertly detonated a nuclear bomb to send a cryptic message to the Israelis. The Iranian plateau is prone to earthquakes, and the 10 kilometers deep epicenter could be just the base value that seismographic readers can interpret as smoke without fire. It is increasingly likely that Iran's leadership will get its hands on nuclear weapons if not this year. In the years following, the real question now is what would happen the day after the Israeli-Iranian conflict. The ripple effects of the Israeli-Iran conflict are global, with oil prices reacting to the potential threat to Iran's supply. About a third of the world's maritime oil trade goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and if Iran were to close, strait prices would skyrocket. This puts every advanced economy at risk. In response to these activities, Iran has developed a coalition of proxy forces in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Gaza by arming, funding and training localized militias. However, the deaths of proxy leaders such as Ayatollah Khamenei and Hassan Nasrallah have turned Iran's jewels into relics. Iran may now be sprinting to establish a more conventional form of deterrence, such as nuclear weapons. Iranian officials have been openly insinuating the need for nuclear weapons while the government has been steadily expanding its centrifuges for purifying uranium. Iran's nuclear program has intensified tensions in the Middle East, with American and Israeli lawmakers vying to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. However, the US withdrew from airstrikes in 2011, as Iran's facilities are too deeply buried and nuclear now has proliferated too widely. If Iran built a stockpile of nuclear bombs, it would largely depend on its nuclear doctrine. It could do as India does and set up a centralized body to maintain close control over its nuclear arsenal, only using it in a matter of life or death. A nuclear-armed Iran would act more brazenly and recklessly, applying more pressure on its rivals to achieve strategic goals. The Persian Gulf hosts several U.S. military facilities, including air bases in Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. These facilities are brimming with modern long-range weapons and place Iran's demographic military and logistical sites under American fire control. They also ensure the flow of crude oil and natural gas to global markets which pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran sees the U.S. military bases confine Iranian power to its geography, but it desperately wants to get rid of a nuclear-armed Iran. A nuclear-armed Iran would want to do just that while using the threat of nuclear escalation to deter military retaliation. For starters, it could twist the UAE's arm into surrendering 3 disputed islands, the Greater T, Lesser T, and Abu Musa. These islands were initially occupied by Iran in 1971 during the time of the monarchy and the formation of the UAE. Today, both Tan and Abu Dhabi claim the islands as their own, and for over 40 years, the dispute has been a sore point in relations. If the UAE gives in, Iran could use the islands to set up forward military facilities, including missile launch pads, which it could use to gain additional leverage. Taking the disputed islands could set a dangerous precedent, as Iran's claim is based on historical context, arguing that the islands were part of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC. A nuclear-armed Iran would look to recruit and develop new proxy units, particularly Shia-based ones, particularly in the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia. This would permanently overturn the balance of power between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and Iran would want to abolish the transit corridor. Another corridor Iran dislikes is the Zenza corridor, which goes from Central Asia across the Caspian Sea and then into Turkey. Iran's rivalry with Israel is on the brink of fundamental change, as it acknowledges Israel's conventional military superiority and nuclear edge. In April, Israel attacked Iran's diplomatic mission in Syria, leading to Iran launching missiles and drones at Israel. The US deliberately downplayed the Israeli retaliatory response to avoid a broader conflict. A nuclear-armed Iran would reshape this configuration, as both the Israelis and Iranians would rely on their nuclear arsenals to shield them from conventional escalation. This dynamic is known as the stability-instability paradox, a behavioral thesis dating back to the Cold War. A nuclear-armed Iran would augment proxy forces such as Hezbollah and Hamas, much like the Soviet attempt to build missile facilities in Cuba. Iranians could try to smuggle nuclear bombs into the hands of Hezbollah, but the threat would be there. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iraqi militias would likely behave more belligerently knowing they have the backing of a nuclear-armed power for Iran. The risks associated with supporting its proxies would drop as nuclear deterrence is established viewed in a larger context. The United States could learn to live with Iran possessing nuclear weapons, but many regional nations will see it differently. Some will look for ways to deter the Iranians by developing their own nuclear weapons, such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and the UAE. If Iran goes nuclear, a nuclear arms race would become inevitable. The stability and stability paradox suggests that such an arms race would be essential to stabilize the wider region. Nuclear power is such a destructive element that even the most determined leaders respect it. However, policymakers would rather steer clear of nuclear tests, as they would need a few more months to develop an arsenal before detonating one on the surface.